Thank you, Sir Roger, and Happy New Year to everybody too. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in regards to us considering the pay gaps in the workplace. So Roger, there are multiple pay gaps in the workplace. I've had emails about age pay gaps, size pay gap, accents pay gaps, and as a certified Cockney, I can know that this is true. And just for the record, I say some of the most intelligent people I know are Cockneys. But today, on Ethnicity Pay Gap Day, I want to focus on gender, ethnicity and disability pay gaps. The key thing is that if you measure it, you can fix it. And at the current rate, it will take another 40 years to fix the gender and ethnicity pay gap. Now, nobody should feel happy about that slow rate of progress. So, and imagine how long it will take to fix the disability pay gap. It will take even longer. And last year, the Fawcett Society reported that Equal Pay Day fell on the 20th of November, 2 days earlier than the year before. That essentially means that on that day, the 20th of November, women were working for free for the rest of the year. And so, Roger, it is shocking that on average women earn £630 less a month than their male counterpart. And on social media, people sometimes say, what's this all about? And are you trying to reduce how much men are paid? That isn't what this is about. This is about fairness and equality. And it's about paying people more, not paying people less. And I don't want social media and the manipulation and the misinformation of people saying when we talk about equal rights and fairness, it's somehow doing down men, because it absolutely isn't. And currently, the ethnicity pay gap is 5.6% and the disability pay gap is 12.7%. That is a whopping pay gap. And we have to acknowledge that the government is to be applauded for its ambition and plan to make work pay. And the Prime Minister actually said, I think it was part of his New Year's message, that the security of working people, that is the purpose of this government. And I think that is something that we should all applaud, that working people should be secure in their job and in their work. Now, in the King's speech, companies of 250 plus employees have to report ethnicity and disability pay gaps, which is welcomed. And it's also welcomed that gender pay gap reporting has been expanded to produce equality action plans. That's great, but producing the equality action plans just isn't enough. What are companies going to do with the action plans? How are they going to ensure that they use the action plans to close the pay gaps? So it's one step, but it doesn't go far enough. And what we have to acknowledge, Sir Roger, that what we do now will actually make the workplace better for everybody. Not just women, not just just people with disabilities, not just people with different ethnicities. Everybody will benefit if the workplace is fairer. And there has been research found that men want flexibility in the workplace. So often it's always framed around women wanting flexibility in the workplace. But the reality of the situation is men also want flexibility in the workplace. If we make that a standard, then everybody will be happy. And no matter who's doing the job, no matter who's doing the work, they should be paid fairly, no matter who they are or what they look like. So I also feel there needs to be a concerted effort where we stop stereotyping people into jobs or creating structures that try and normalise inequality. And I'll tell you one case. Happy to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way on that point and congratulate her on securing this debate. But the Equality Act 2010 states that it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of race. Yet, in 2024, black people and 19.04% hourly mean rate less than their white counterparts. But the Employment Rights Bill provides an opportunity for employers to develop and publish an equality action plan. However, those action plans at the moment only cover gender. So does my honourable friend agree with me that the government needs to place more emphasis on ethnicity gap issues, and that the Employment Rights Bill that's in committee stage at the moment needs to make that right by covering that in this bill at this stage?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and she's absolutely right. Like, if we're going to make the workplace fairer, if that's our ambition, and our ambition to secure the workplace for everybody, then we should take the opportunities that are laid before us, and that is one of the opportunities where we can ensure that we not only close the gap, but we make workplaces fairer. And just on that point, Sir Roger, there was one case as a trade union official that was easy to identify, and that's where men were called chefs and women were called cooks. And chefs were paid a higher rate than the cooks. That was, if you like, an easy one once we could figure out what was going on. A more difficult case was Kay. And Kay said, I had been working as a chef with a large catering company for 10 years. During a casual conversation, my colleague mentioned he was being paid £22,000 a year. This was £6,000 a year more than me. I thought the right to equal pay would mean I was being paid fairly. But for years, I went to work each day without knowing I was being paid less than those who I was working alongside. I am not an isolated case. I know there are many women who, like me, don't realise they are experiencing pay discrimination. That picks up on my honourable friend's point in regards to the laws there, but actually, if you don't know what the person next to you is paying who's doing the same job, then you could be discriminated against. And so, Roger, some people say, but some men and women do different jobs, they do different types of work, or they do different hours. Now, the law says the same work or work of equal value, but also taking that into consideration, even when men and women are they work the same hours and the same roles, nearly 2/3 of the gender pay gap remains unexplained. So this does point, Sir Roger, to pay discrimination. And so we must tackle, as a government, pay discrimination. And how do we do this? How do we tackle pay discrimination? And how do we move faster towards security, fairness and equality? Transparency. It's important for people to know who's being paid what and why. The right to know. We should introduce something where people have the right to know, so that in case situation, she should be able to say how much is X being paid. So she'll know that there's a £6,000 pay deficit. And also actionable and enforceable action plans. Again, if an organisation knows that there is a pay gap, they've identified it, unless they've committed to closing that pay gap, it probably won't happen. And another way that companies can do this is that if it's assigned as a KPI, as a key performance indicator, what we found is that organisations that assign it to somebody as a KPI, real action is taken and pay gaps begin to close. And on this point, the government has a huge role to play, not just in legislation, which we can do with the Equal Pay Act, etc., but in also securing the circular economy. So the government can have an active role in making the workplace fairer by ensuring, and we've done this in some areas of government, that only companies that practice good practices, that pay people well, that pay people fairly, that don't have a pay gap, are given contracts by the government. So the government's procurement contract processes can ensure that they only give contracts to companies that follow good practices, and this will enrich the circular economy. And companies, this isn't just about doing the right thing. Companies who pay people well, that employ the right people for the right jobs, in general, they have a 15% higher profit margin than their nearest counterparts. And that also plays out in a lot of young people now are becoming socially informed. So they like to shop with companies that have good ethics, that consider climate change. And so this is something that will benefit everybody. It is a good thing to do. So Roger, as I come to the end, some may wonder why I've not mentioned fines. Well, to my knowledge, and the Minister may correct me on this, no company has ever been fined for their gender pay gap. So unless this part of the law is strengthened, it is kind of meaningless. So it'll be interesting to know how we ensure that we do fine companies who are not closing their pay gaps, and what the government plans to do with any money that is collected. And there is, Roger, a stark difference in different regions of the UK. Some do better than others. In London, it has the largest ethnicity pay gap. It currently stands at a whopping 23.8%. And it's appalling that this exists in one of the most diverse capitals, cities of the world, and also our financial capital city of the UK. And as chair of the London PLP, I want to accelerate this move to ensuring that we close those pay gaps. And I must commend Diane Grayson, the founder of #Ethnicity Pay Gap, for the work that she's doing around this. And as chair of the all-party parliamentary group for GALE, Governance and Inclusive Leadership, I launched a maturity matrix in Parliament. And this is a guide. It's available online for free for companies to implement in their workplace. So it takes them through various stages to how they can recognise and close the pay gaps. And it's been so successful, so Roger, that companies now ask for it to be expanded for disability and other things. So that is currently being done. As I say, it's a free resource, because ultimately what we want is good and better, fairer workplaces. So Roger, people should be paid fairly on merit. No one should be paid less for their work because of their gender, colour of their skin, ethnicity, background, their accent, size, age or class. And if we get this right on gender, ethnicity and disability, we will create a better and fairer work environment for all. Thank you, Sir Roger. Yeah.